Baltimore has a complicated reputation, from shows that spotlight the crime of the city to the former president referring to it as a rat-infested slum. Before I get into my own personal opinions on Baltimore, we must talk about the history of the city and how exactly we got here. Perhaps along the way, we can figure out why exactly Baltimore has the reputation it does, and maybe even how it could begin to be fixed.
Well, my name is Kashara Curtis.
My name's Danielle Hodges.
I've basically lived in Baltimore my entire life. I was born here.
I moved to Baltimore from like rural Kansas, more or less.
I've lived here my entire life, even though like the city got its issues like, other cities.
Baltimore was established in 1729 as a port for shipping of tobacco and grain. As time progressed, Baltimore had become a place for both enslaved people and ex-enslaved people to seek refuge. With Maryland being a border state, it made it so that keeping people enslaved was difficult, as the enslaved people could flee to the north, such as Frederick Douglass, and as such, the slaveholders had to turn to manumission. The profitability of slavery was just no longer there, and as such, the enslaved population decreased notably between the 1850s and 60s. This would boil over in time as rural black people fled to Maryland and created competition for jobs with the white workers, which resulted in many confrontations and upset the previous relationship that free black people and whites had at the time before the war. With the turn of the 20th century came the introduction of new Jim Crow laws that barred black people from living in predominantly white blocks and vice versa. Milton Dashiell, the lawyer behind this bill, claims that it was not because they were racist. No, of course not, but because it would lower property values. This blatant segregation meant that there was little upward momentum for black people, and that finding their way out of poverty in the city was difficult, if not near impossible. That essentially brings us to today. While the laws that push black people into the margins are no longer in effect themselves, they can still very much be felt today. The compartmentalization of black people into certain areas of the city, particularly those of lower property value, has created a vicious cycle that is still in play to this day. Baltimore undoubtedly has problems. Many are rooted in years and years of harsh Jim Crow laws and unapologetic racism. This is not an excuse to write off an entire city as violent, as ugly, as dirty, or any of these harmful adjectives that are prescribed to it. In lieu of all of its problems and all of its complicated histories, Baltimore still lives and breathes. There are still artists, still a thriving music scene, amazing charities, and so many things that give life to a city that has stood through hardship after hardship.
It's just a nice little home for me, no matter what anybody else says.
There was I think it was this last winter actually. There was this perfect snow day, like the snow, or maybe it was 2 winters ago, I don't remember, but the snow was like the perfect beautiful Christmas card snow. It was like pretty thick and fluffy, and I left my apartment and I thought it was really beautiful, so me and my partner took a drive around town and we drove all over town just to look at the snow.
Our music scene and our art scene runs so deep, and it's very, very underrated compared to, like I said, any other major city like New York or LA, but it's so strong down here. Like the art community and the music scene community are so like tight knit. The amount of times me and my friends just randomly went down to the harbor to see what was going on or what they were doing, and we were just, just shooting the shit, like having an absolute blast, just taking everything in. Or there was some random event happening and we just so happened to be smack dead in the middle of it, and we're just like, okay, I guess we're doing this now.
As someone who was born and raised in the city and is always learning more about it and finding new things to love, it saddens me to see so many people quickly write it off and refuse to give it the fighting chance that it deserves. Little elsewhere in the States can I think of that so many people have already made their minds up about. Before one even steps foot into Baltimore, it feels as though their opinion has already been made up.
Because I view Baltimore like I would any other metropolitan city, which I feel like people don't do enough.
Even here at Micah, there is a tangible fear of engaging with the city and the people who live here, so much so that it's earned itself the moniker the Micah Bubble. And while I understand people's apprehension given the city's high crime rates and how new it may be for students coming from out of state, This apprehension to explore beyond the confines of the campus at all contributes to the harmful narrative that is so often pushed about the city.
Want people to leave with, especially a certain demographic of people, to leave with the fact of Baltimore is not a boogeyman. Baltimore is not some being that's just stalking, waiting for you to come closer just so it can get you. It's again, it's literally just like any other major city. It has its issues. You do need to be street smart, because especially if you're at Micah on literal West Baltimore, because technically speaking, you're on those people's turf. They're not on yours. You're in their area, not the reverse. As long as you are respectful, and once again, just remind yourself of the fact of these are people, literal regular ass people who are just living their lives. Technically, I'm in their way, especially if you're not from here. Just keep in mind, you're in their way. They're not in yours. Literally, all most Baltimoreans want for people, especially people who are not from here, is just to be respectful. Obviously, there are certain places you should avoid, but don't sit here and just act like you're never supposed to leave your house and that, Baltimore is this, that, and the third. Like, because after a certain point, that's just some of these opinions start, just showing how you really feel about the people that live here, not the city itself. And once again, I probably shouldn't be selling Baltimore this hard, but again, I rap for my city. Like, just go out there and have fun. There's so much shit going on. There's literally so much shit that you can get into at Baltimore. There's no reason for you to just not go anywhere.